Hey friends, it's Jessica from Three Rivers Homestead, and I'm back with another video for you. We did lots of fun things in the kitchen and on the homestead this week, so why don't we go ahead and get started, and I'll take you through everything that we were able to accomplish. We started out the week with the most amazing weather. I love this time of year. It's been in the 70s during the day and maybe down in the 50s at night. On Sunday, we were able to enjoy a wonderful day of grilling and just being together as a family. By Thursday night, it actually dropped down to 39 degrees, so it's starting to get chilly. And, coincidentally, it was the first official day of autumn. And so we're just trying to transition the homestead into that new season of slower times, work is changing, putting the garden to bed, those kinds of things. But other than that, this week we had really exciting news. Adam and I took off on a little day date and we went to pick up two new calves. These are actually replacement calves for the two calves that we lost back in July. I don't know if you guys remember that experience, but we had bought two beef calves. We got a steer and a heifer calf from a local farm, and he has a huge operation. It's a commercial beef cattle farm as well as show cattle. He knows what he's doing, and it just was a freak accident or something happened. I don't know if it was shipping fever or what, where both of the calves died within a 48-hour period, and it was extremely traumatic and tragic for us. And this man, out of the kindness of his heart, was not obligated to do so, but he replaced those calves for us for free. Such a blessing for our family, and we were able to go pick them up today. So here they are. We got two steers, two little boys. We have yet to name them yet. The children will do that in the coming days, I'm sure. And loading them and unloading them was much easier now that we built this new alleyway. This was the purpose for building it. The last time was so stressful. We didn't know that if that stress had contributed to the shipping fever that we think they died of. This time, everything went smoothly. We treated them preventatively for shipping fever just in case, and we're just doing everything that we learned from the last experience. We just learned from it, and we're moving on and hoping for a better outcome. So here are our two new calves. This will be our beef for the year 2024, and that was just some exciting news that happened this week on the homestead. Speaking of beef, though, I'm going to show you a canning project that we were up to this week. As part of my postpartum meal baby preparations, I'm going to can 7 quarts on this day of beef stew. So I have my thawed stew meat. This is from our beef cow that we had just processed last month. And I thawed enough of that to can and then to make the rest for dinner on this evening. I also have potatoes, onions, garlic, carrots. We have some fresh parsley that I went out and picked from the garden. We have some bay leaves, and then of course we'll do salt and pepper. And this is what we're going to use to make our stew today. So the first thing I do when I'm canning my stew is I'm going to put my spices and things in the bottom of the jar. So I just put about a half a bay leaf into the bottom of each jar here. These jars are sterile. They're clean, but they're not warmed. They're just room temperature. Now we're also going to take a half a teaspoon of salt and add that to the bottom of each jar. Now I have my garlic cloves. We're going to add a little bit of that to each jar as well, but first it needs chopped. I'm using this little tool. I think it's in my Amazon storefront. The link is in my bio for that if you are interested in something like this, but it makes it pretty handy to just kind of chop it up for you. And what we're going to do is kind of portion. I believe this was about 8 or 9 garlic cloves that I ended up cutting up. And I'll just take an equal scoop of each and add that to each jar. So here we go. Worked like perfectly. We'll just scoop that out and add that to the bottom of the jars. Next, we need to add our parsley. So I washed the parsley really well. I'm just going to actually take the parsley leaves off of the stems and just put a little bit into each jar, and that will add some wonderful parsley flavor. You could add whatever herbs you enjoy in your beef stew, however you like to season it. This is the time. Put it in the bottom of the jar, and then we're going to start adding our bigger ingredients on top of that. So now we have our stew meat, and I'm just filling it about a third of the way, a third to a half of the way with the stew meat. And this is completely thawed. You never want to put frozen meat in your jars to process. That is a recipe for breaking jars or having all sorts of seal failures. Next, we chopped some onion and put a little bit in each jar. And now I am chopping carrots and adding that on top of the onion. The carrots and these potatoes that I'm slicing now were both peeled. And we're just going to fill the rest of the way with these potatoes. And by that point, our jars will be completely filled and we are just about done. Now, there are multiple ways to can soups. Some people prefer to cook the stew first and then can it. I figure the less times it's heated, the better. So as you can see, I just have all of my raw ingredients in here. And then all of this will cook through the canning process. Because it processes so long, everything will be thoroughly cooked by the time it is done and sealed up. So the next thing we need to do is just top it off with water, and you want to make sure you remove your air bubbles. I'm going to leave 1-inch headspace, and this is just room temperature water. Now we are going to add our 4 jars canning lids here. Remember, as always, if you would like 10% off of your canning lids, you can use my code 3rivers10 and use the link in the description of this video and get 10% off of your lids. So as I mentioned, there's room temperature water in the jars. That means I have to put room temperature water in my canner. And then we are going to process this for 90 minutes. When we're all done, here we go. There's our beef stew, 7 quarts that I will enjoy as meals postpartum on days where I don't want to cook for myself. Now it is another day, time for another project. Last week I mentioned my homemade marshmallow fluff that I use for our hot cocoa. And so I thought this week there were some requests to show you the process. I'm going to show you. So I take a cup of warm water and I add 3 tablespoons of gelatin. I use beef gelatin. I get this in bulk from Azure Standard. You could use the little boxes of gelatin. There's like pork-based gelatin, the Knox gelatin that you get in the grocery store, any kind of gelatin. And just because it says pork or beef, that doesn't mean it's going to be flavored that way. This is flavorless and odorless. So as I mentioned, 3 tablespoons will be added to your warm water. After it is stirred up and it sits there for a while, the gelatin will start to bloom. I guess that's the best way I can describe it. It will start to absorb that water and kind of fluff up a little bit. Then I put it in my mixer. I add just a little bit of vanilla, or you could do peppermint extract. And then I add 1 cup of sweetener. On this day, I'm using our homegrown raw honey. You could do maple syrup, any kind of sweetener that you want. On this day, I'm actually doing a double batch. So you can double this recipe. It makes quite a bit, even if you're just doing 1 cup of everything. It is a lot of marshmallow fluff. It is enough for our whole family to have fluff for their cocoa, but if you have a smaller family, you might want to have this recipe. Cut it in half, or else you're going to end up with a lot of leftovers. So you just put it in the mixer, and it can take anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes in the mixer on high in order for that fluff to fully fluff up. And then after the end of that 5 to 10 minutes, you have a delicious, wonderful, fluffy treat to put in the top of your hot cocoa or whatever you would like to use it for. On this day, we are using it to freeze dry. I want to, after the baby comes, have some marshmallow available that I can just pull off the shelf and put in our hot cocoa, and it'll save me the time of having to make it as we need it during those really busy postpartum times. So I did put parchment paper down on top of my freeze dryer trays. You could use a silicone mat if you have one of those. I've actually had good results just putting it directly on top of the pan as well. You can scoop it into dollops and freeze dry it that way. I've actually piped it out into cute little shapes before, but on this day I made so much that I'm just literally spreading it flat on the trays, and I'll show you when it's done how it turns out. I can just break it into little mug-sized pieces that then the kids will drop into their cocoa. Unfortunately, you can't dehydrate this recipe to dry it. It will melt it. There is a little bit that we have left over that we'll put in the fridge, and Mama will enjoy that in her hot cocoa later on in the week. So I don't have a full batch. So what I decided to do, last week I showed you freeze-dried pickle juice poured directly on my trays. This week I decided to experiment by freezing the pickle juice in my little mini muffin trays like this. And then I thought if I lay down the parchment paper, I can pop out the cubes, freeze dry it on top, and then I will waste less of that pickle juice by having it stuck to the freeze dryer tray. So this is just completely experimental, just an easier way to do this. Some of you last week had asked how I plan to use freeze-dried pickle juice. It is quite a strange thing, but I think it's going to be delicious sprinkled on top of popcorn. And some of you said that you like to use your pickle juice as a marinade for meats and that it gives it a really delicious flavor. So it's just a great way. You guys know me. I don't like anything to go to waste. So this is just a great way to not have to use fridge space up or freezer space up and just make it shelf stable as a powder. So there we go. And Elizabeth is obviously one of my children who enjoys drinking pickle juice. So she is finding all of the little ice cube chunks that are left in the bottom of that muffin tin. And of course, none of that is now going to waste. Oh, looks like she recruited Benjamin, and Benjamin also likes his pickle juice. So it's funny, me being pregnant, it's a cliche that pregnant women like pickles. I am not a pregnant woman who likes pickles, so I'll leave that to the kids. So here are my 4 freeze dryer trays. We're going to go ahead and load these up into the machine. Some of you are probably wondering if the flavor of the pickle will cross into the marshmallow fluff being in the freeze dryer together, and that is not the case. The only things I've ever put into the freeze dryer and had the flavor or the smell kind of cross into other foods are onions and garlic. So those are 2 foods that if I'm going to be freeze drying them, they would be all alone or with other foods that I don't mind having that garlic or onion flavor. So, all right, the end of this day, we had a quick fajita meal here. Actually, this was a lunch. And then the next day, just showing you how that freeze dryer batch kind of turned out. The kids were going to help me. We're going to get these off of the trays and see how easy this is. My experiment here with the ice cubes, some of those, the thicker ice cubes did not fully freeze dry, which was really disappointing. They were already frozen. But the marshmallow fluff turned out great, of course. It always does. The thing that we had to do is kind of peel the parchment paper off of the back of the fluff. This would be much easier with a silicone mat, but this worked just fine. So the kids were helping me and enjoying eating some of those marshmallows as they were doing their work. And then as I mentioned, those will just go straight into a jar. No oxygen absorber is needed. We plan to use these up in the next 3 to 6 months. The kids will just grab a chunk, put it in their hot cocoa. It will rehydrate it and add the sweetness and the marshmallow flavor to whatever it is that they are eating. So my goal is to have 2-gallon size containers of that before I have the baby. Next, we are going to can some green beans on this day. Yay! I've got the little guys busy out here with their coloring books. Some of you guys wonder what the kids are doing when I'm busy in the kitchen. A lot of times they're just busy doing things like this, and because there are so many of them, they are great at entertaining each other. So I just had small amounts of green beans and okra in the fridge, and we had lots of veggies in the fridge. I didn't need these for raw eating, and since they were extras, I figured why not can a small batch. So let me show you what I do with just these small amounts of vegetables like this. On this day, I decided to just can them up into pints. So I've got green beans and okra together. And these are just great for side dishes for lunches. Some of my kids like canned green beans, some of them don't. So it's just a nice addition to a meal for a couple of the kids, or it can be dumped into a soup. And the processing time for pints of green beans is 20 minutes. The processing time for okra in pints is 25. So we're just going to pressure can these all for 25, and that will ensure everything is safe. I raw packed these vegetables in water. Nothing else was added. And once again, it's all about keeping the temperature the same. So since these are in room temperature water, the water in my canner also needs to be room temperature, and that will ensure safe canning. All right, guys, I have not done an Azure standard haul in 3 months, I think, but this week we had to pick up our haul, so I thought I'd go ahead and show you what I got. Let me start over here. This is my cacao powder. I get cacao powder instead of cocoa powder. There is a difference in the processing, and cacao powder is supposed to be pure. There's less chemicals in the processing or something like that. Anyways, I get a good price on this at Azure Standard. And as you guys know, I'm craving hot cocoa right now during my pregnancy. And so this is something that I need to make sure I have stocked up just to get through the winter. So got myself a little bag of that. We also use this to make brownies and chocolate cakes. So I think we have about a half a gallon in the house. I needed a little more. I also stocked up on some cinnamon. I know there are different kinds of cinnamon and everybody has preferences in terms of health benefits and flavors. I tend to just pick up whatever I get the best deal on at the time, and this was the cinnamon that I purchased on this particular order. It could be different the next time. I also needed to get a big bag of oregano. We use oregano in all of our pizza and pasta sauces, and unfortunately my oregano plants in the garden died this year and I wasn't able to harvest any. So this should get us through the rest of the year and be set on that. My favorite coconut aminos, since I can't have soy, this is what I use when I make Chinese or food or sushi and things. And then we got a big 5-pound bag of poppy seeds. We go through a lot of poppy seed muffins and poppy seed bread, and you just get a better deal when you buy them in bulk. They won't go bad in storage. So I figured why not get the larger bag to get a better price on that. Now moving on to the next thing, I got 10 total pounds of these organic frozen mixed vegetables. I have some plans to can some chicken pot pie filling, and this is just easier to do it with these, and I get a great deal on this. So we will make the chicken pot pie filling, and then anything left over can be freeze dried and put on the shelves. I also got 10 pounds of my favorite gluten-free pasta. This is tinkyada rice pasta. It's a great gluten-free option. It doesn't get mushy. It's the only kind of gluten-free pasta that I really like, so made sure to get enough of that. We also got 25 pounds of organic juicing carrots. These are number 2 carrots, which means they're cheaper than number 1s. And I got these mostly to make things like the beef stew that I showed you earlier that I had canned. We have carrots in the garden right now, but those won't be ready for probably another month. I probably won't harvest those for another month. And so these should get us through with the canning projects I have planned. And also we'll use a lot for fresh eating until my garden carrots are ready. I also got 12 packages of my favorite convenience food. These are hash browns. The ingredients are just potatoes. That's why I like these hash browns. They're all cubed up for me. If I want a quick breakfast, I can just fry them in some bacon grease or oil or something. I put them in my breakfast casseroles. It's purely a convenience and luxury item that I like to have on hand. I also got 4 pounds of baking powder, and I know you're saying that's a lot of baking powder. but I will use it before it goes bad. We typically go through a container this size in about 6 months. We do that much baking. Remember that baking powder does lose its effectiveness over time. If you're not going to go through this much before it goes bad, don't buy it in bulk. Get it in smaller quantities. But I like to get aluminum-free baking powder. Everybody has different preferences. It's just what I feel comfortable with, and Azure has a great price on that. So I do that about twice a year. I buy that. I also bought 11 pounds of organic dates. You guys may not know this, but it is beneficial for pregnant women to eat dates during the 3rd trimester of pregnancy, specifically in the last month. There are many studies, peer-reviewed studies out there that show the benefits of this. It leads to better labor outcomes, shorter labors, lots of benefits that you can look up, but I need to start eating those, so I got myself a box of dates. I also got 6 packages of these brown rice cakes, and the kids dug into these on the drive home. They were already opened, but I use these a lot of times if the kids are having sandwiches for lunch. I use those as my bread substitute. Just put some sun butter on it or some egg salad or something like that, and they're just a nice treat to have on hand for busy days. I also got 50 pounds of this organic wheat flour. It's like an all-purpose flour. It is one of my favorite flours to have on hand. I haven't been able to get it in quite a while, and so that was really exciting to be able to stock up on that. Here we have 33 pounds of palm fruit shortening. As you guys know, we can't have butter in our house, and we do use lard in some baking as a butter substitute, but we don't have infinite amounts of lard, and David does a lot of baking. So we go through this 33-pound box, usually lasts us about a year. So this will get us through for quite a while, and we just use it in our pastries and things just like you would use butter. It's a great dairy-free alternative for us. And then finally, I got 50 pounds of organic potatoes. I actually also have potatoes in the garden right now, but they are not quite ready to be harvested. We probably won't harvest them for another month, and we will easily go through 50 pounds of potatoes in a month. So this box is just for canning projects and to get us through for fresh eating until I harvest what is in the garden. And that is my order, you guys. It was a nice little order. I think I have one more big Azure stock up I'm going to do before the baby comes. My next stock up, I'm going to focus on bulk grains. You guys know me. I don't like to go grocery shopping in the winter. I like to take a couple months off, and I just want to make sure we have everything we need, especially when the baby comes, because I don't want to be wrapping up a bunch of children and a newborn baby during Ohio's January and February to walk them through the cold and germy grocery store. So, all right, the hardest part of doing an Azure standard pickup is getting home from it and having to get everything put away and in its proper place. Meanwhile, kids have been cooped up in the car for the drive to and from the pickup, so they're running around and everybody's hungry and wants to eat. So it's always crunch time for me when we get home trying to get things put away. And the kids are very helpful. The older children entertain the little ones for me while I do this and help me haul things to and from the freezers and the fridge out in the garage. These are those little cans of vegetables that we canned up the other day, just getting those labeled and also put away so I have a nice clear countertop to make my next meal. So hopefully you enjoyed that little peek into our week. I hope that you had a wonderful week as well, and we look forward to sharing more with you next week. Until then, friends, I pray blessings over you and your family. We'll see you later.